Welcome, everyone, to the third webinar in this series, the Challenges in Pediatric Neuroscience Research webinar series. My name is Adam Hartman, and I'm a program director in the Division of Clinical Research at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders of Stroke, one of the institutes at the U.S. National Institutes of Health. I have a number of pediatric clinical trials and other human subject studies in my portfolio. I also am a practicing child neurologist and epileptologist. We created the series to help investigators overcome some of the challenges that they might face in pediatric neuroscience in areas including neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, psychology, neurodevelopmental disabilities, physiatry, critical care, emergency medicine, pathology, radiology, and pharmacology, just to name a few, and there are many others. The ultimate goal is to improve the quality of care for our patients, but the more proximal goal is to enhance research that will facilitate improvements in practice. Our webinars are targeted to trainees, senior investigators, and even to those who are not currently involved in research, making the pie bigger, so to speak. We'll be discussing diversity today. The importance of this topic cannot be underestimated. As you will see, diversity and equity have been long-standing interests at NINDS. We believe that the information today is important not just for applicants, but also for mentors who can play a critical role in the career trajectory of their trainees. Our guests today are Drs. Lauren Ulrich and Marguerite Matthews of the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Diversity and Dr. Erika Augustine from University of Rochester. First, a few technical notes about the webinar. This session is being recorded and will be transcribed and archived on the NINDS website. Details about where to find the archived version will be posted on social media and professional society listservs and newsletters. There will be a question and answer segment at the end. To ask a question of our presenters, you can either click on the ellipsis near the bottom of your screen and click on Q&A, or open the participant window and on the bottom right, find the Q&A area. To repeat, if you have questions for our presenters, please either click on the ellipsis near the bottom of your screen and click on Q&A, or open the participant window and on the bottom right, find the Q&A area. I will moderate the question period. Special thanks to Tim Leyden from NINDS for the technical support and coordination of the webinar, and the NINDS Office of the Scientific Liaison for all of its support and the publicity. As a side note, we are looking to hire a new program director in the neurodevelopmental disabilities area at NINDS. Please see the information here and contact the email here or me if you are interested. Okay, let's get started. We'll be starting with two speakers. Dr. Lauren Ulrich is a program director in the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Diversity at NINDS. Dr. Ulrich received her Ph.D. and MS in neuroscience from Georgetown University, researching memory and early Alzheimer's disease for her thesis, and also published on teaching, pedagogy, and professional development in science. She received her BA from Swarthmore College in psychobiology. Prior to coming to NINDS as a AAAS Science and Technology Fellow, she worked for the Society for Neuroscience in a range of policy and programmatic areas, including government and public affairs, scientific rigor and reproducibility, workforce and training, and animals and research. At NINDS, she helps coordinate NINDS's diversity activities, which span the pipeline from neuroscience education outreach, grades K through 12, to funding opportunities and mentoring networks across critical career transition points. Dr. Marguerite Matthews is a program analyst in the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Diversity at NINDS. She first came to NIH as a 2016 to 18 AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow in the Office of Extramural Research within the Division of Biomedical Research Workforce and the Division of Loan Repayment to analyze and evaluate policies that impact early career researchers. She earned a BS in biochemistry from Spelman College and a PhD in neuroscience from the University of Pittsburgh, studying the development of the dopamine system during adolescence. She completed her postdoctoral fellowship at the Oregon Health and Science University, where she examined the development of the human brain using functional and structural neuroimaging. While a postdoc, Dr. Matthews also served as the co-founder and program director for the Youth Engaged in Science Outreach Initiative and program director for the OHSU Fellowship for Diversity in Research program to recruit and retain underrepresented postdoctoral researchers. Drs. Ulrich and Matthews,
Thank you so much for having us today. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being on the call with us. And Lauren and I will sort of be switching off and talking about some of the way that NIH is structured and some of the programs that we'd like to highlight for you. This is certainly an abbreviated overview, so if you have questions about something we didn't cover in this presentation, please feel free to ask in the chat box or at the end for the Q&A. So I don't know if it needs to be underscored here, but diversity certainly matters in all areas of life, but certainly in the biomedical research workforce. And NIH is dedicated to ensuring that our workforce is reflective of the nation's diversity. And there are plenty of studies that have shown that the more diverse working groups are, the more the better quality of the research, and the better that teams are able to work together to advance in the mission. So it's important for NIH to recruit talented researchers from all different levels, all different groups, to really leverage the US's intellectual capital. So when you have a lack of diversity, especially in this physician scientist workforce, it creates a bit of a challenge in really having the most advanced clinical and scientific research. And at NIH, we have working groups that have shown this. And one thing that we're really trying to do here, especially with this webinar, is to showcase the importance of having a diverse physician scientist workforce. So thank you all for being part of this. So there are certainly many definitions of diversity. We can think of it in a bunch of different ways, but if you're reading anything, any literature or funding announcements coming out of NIH, it's important to recognize what the word diversity oftentimes means when thinking about funding opportunities that are specific to increasing the diversity of the workforce. So typically at NIH, diversity is used to represent individuals that are underrepresented in the biomedical, clinical, behavioral, and social sciences. And this includes individuals from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, individuals with disabilities, typically defined as those with physical or mental impairments, individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds, and there are certainly parameters of what disadvantaged backgrounds mean. And at senior levels, women are oftentimes underrepresented. So at NINDS, the office that Lauren and I work in, we call ourselves the Open Office, the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Workforce Diversity. And our sole goal is to open opportunities and access to enhance the diversity of the neuroscience workforce. And oftentimes we often think about what is needed to accomplish this. So we develop and implement very specific types of funding opportunities, both at the individual and institutional level, which we'll get a little bit more into in this presentation. And we work across the NINDS scientific portfolio to promote inclusion. And I should also say that we work across the NIH, especially across institutes and centers of the NIH that have a neuroscience portfolio. And so we are sort of under the great leadership of Dr. Michelle Jones-London. And as you can see here, both Lauren and I support Michelle and others in this work. So for those of you who may be or may not be familiar with how NIH is structured, you can think of the NIH sort of as the United States. And the sort of central office, the Office of the Director, Dr. Francis Collins, and you can think of that as the President's office. And then NIH is made up of 27 different institutes and centers that you can think of as states. So they each have their own governing bodies. They have sort of a different priorities, research priorities. They oftentimes fall under a specific body part or disorder, and they also have their own budgets. And NINDS is just one piece of a very large pie, and we administer different sort of funding opportunities, and funding announcements that come out of our office may or may not look like other funding opportunities at different institutes and centers across NIH. So today we'll be talking very specifically about things that NINDS is involved in. But please know that if for some reason your research or your clinical interests fall under, may or may not fall under us, perhaps it aligns with another institute and center, you'll want to talk with someone at that institute or center for very specific information about those funding opportunities. So I also would like to highlight some of the cross NIH initiatives that we have. So many of you may have heard of the BRAIN Initiative. It's sort of akin to the Cancer Moonshot, this idea of really advancing technologies and opportunities to understand how the brain works. Typically very cutting edge, high risk, high reward types of research are funded through this initiative. We also have the NIH Blueprint for Neuroscience Research. This also, both BRAIN and Blueprint cross many different institutes and centers at the NIH. We also have the Helping to End Addiction Long-Term Initiative, which is the HEAL initiative, merging sort of this idea of addressing the opioid epidemic. Then we have the Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease-related dementias. And these all have separate funding mechanisms that are outside of one institute's budget. So this often provides more funding to allow researchers in these areas to really advance these different fields and the different priorities of each of these initiatives.
Okay, so I'm Lauren Ulrich, and I'm going to sort of go through our office's philosophy for the way that we organize our work and our programs. And so the first, we really envision these things as interlocking gears, that none of these things are sufficient on their own. We really need all of the parts working together in order to make progress. And so we divide our thinking up into sort of individual, so these might be individual awards like fellowships or career development awards. We have institutional awards that go to support, say, a cohort of students at a defined program. And then thinking about like policies and other kinds of interventions that might happen across a broader scientific community or a neuroscience or a neurology community. So first, we're going to talk about our individual awards. So just as a little bit of background to provide you with some framing for the reasons why we have these diversity targeted programs. Which is really that, the current research environment, as you all are probably aware, is often perceived as very challenging. And for trainees that come from underrepresented backgrounds, it's even more challenging. And we also know that these students are underrepresented in neuroscience graduate programs. So around 11% of those enrolled in neuroscience graduate programs were from underrepresented groups in 2014. That's the most recent data that we have. And then when you look at medical school, in 2018, only 14% of matriculants to medical schools were from underrepresented backgrounds. And so that obviously does not reflect the diversity of the United States. And then on the right, we have some data from AAMC looking at neurology faculty, and you can see that the picture is even more bleak, that we have only 2% of neurology faculty are Black, and 6% are Hispanic or Latino. So what is NINDS and NIH trying to do about these issues? So here you can see a schematic of all of our individual awards, and we generally think of these in a few different buckets. So we have some mechanisms and programs that are specifically focused on clinician scientists. We have some that are sort of general awards, and then we have diversity targeted awards. And then we have some sort of special, unique kinds of awards. And so we're only going to focus on a couple of specific awards today in the interest of time, but just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we have a lot of different types of awards, different flavors. And if you contact us with your specific questions or concerns, we can usually find something to fit you. So the first award that I wanted to highlight today is one of our newer ones. This is through the NIH Blueprint. And so as Marguerite mentioned, this is a collection of 14 different institutes and centers at the NIH that all fund neuroscience research that have come together to fund programs that can be bigger and more impactful when we all work together, as opposed to each institute trying to work on its own. And the DSPAN program, as we call it, is a program that funds the last 1 to 2 years of graduate school and 4 years of postdoc. And this is specifically for PhDs because the clinical work that would have to happen in between these two phases would just make things very messy. And this is a great program. We do a lot of work helping the scholars network with each other and providing a support system for each other. We have, I think, 59 awardees currently, and so that's from the past 3 years that the program's been in existence. And so if you know of any, or if you are a graduate student that's sort of thinking about finishing up, the end is in sight, and sure that you want to do neuroscience research in the future, this is a great program to consider. So the next few programs that I want to highlight are our diversity career development awards, and we have several different flavors of these. There are 2 that are specific to NINDS, and then 1 brain initiative award. So we have 2 transitional awards. So these are very similar to the DSPAN award that I just talked about, but they go from postdoc to faculty. So you're probably familiar with the K99 R00 transition award, and we have that mechanism specifically, we have it for NINDS writ large, but we also have a diversity targeted version for the brain initiative. So if you're doing research in tools, technologies, circuits, really cutting edge kind of things, then that might be something to consider. And we have a very similar mechanism for NINDS research that is also diversity targeted, that's called the K22 Transition Award. And functionally, it's almost identical to the K99, only it's phase 1, phase 2 instead of K99 R00. So either of those, we encourage postdocs to consider if they're thinking they want to transition to a faculty position. For people who currently are tenure track faculty, we have the K01, which can support tenure track neuroscience faculty within the first 3 years of their faculty appointments. So very junior faculty, and it will give 5 years of funding support. And so this is a really great way to sort of kickstart your research, get that protected time and protected, get a little bit of research funds to get that preliminary data to put in the R01 and take a little of the pressure off of when you're first starting up your lab.
And another set of individual awards that we have that many people unfortunately don't know a whole lot about are diversity supplements. And essentially diversity supplements are administratively reviewed supplements to existing active NIH grants. And there are a ton of research grants that are eligible for diversity supplements. I don't even have enough room to list them all here, but they are available in funding announcements, and they can support folks from the high school level all the way through junior faculty. So essentially what the supplements are able to provide is salary or stipend support depending on the level, and fringe benefits, and some, depending on the level of the candidate that would be supported by the supplement, there are opportunities to get funding for supplies and travel. So essentially, what would happen is if there's a PI who has an eligible grant, and they had a person from one of the NIH-defined diversity backgrounds, they would be able to apply for additional funding to pay that person for their time and for work. And they would have to be working on one of the aims of the grant or something very similar to, so it would have to be within the scope of that particular grant But this would hopefully give them an opportunity to either expose them to a research opportunity, or say you were thinking about switching research opportunities, or really you're looking to get some preliminary data so that you can then apply for a fellowship award or a career development award. This would be a great opportunity to do that. And each institute and center at the NIH supports the diversity supplement mechanisms, but particularly at NINDS, we are very invested in the transition point of using these diversity supplements. So we're really invested in the mentoring aspect of using these supplements, not just to have extra funds for a PI to pay for someone to work in their lab, but really to set them up to be able to further their career. So we often encourage the use of IDPs, which are individual development plans, to help the PI mentor the person that is being supported through a diversity supplement. So they can be used in a variety of ways for a variety of periods of time, but they are a really great opportunity to get sort of quick funding. The turnaround time is generally from the time that the supplement is due to the time of award is about 2 months. So these are a bit quicker turnaround times than if a grant had to be submitted as a competitive grant and have to go through peer review. So I definitely think that this is something that you should think about if you are a trainee, or if you are moving into a career where you have your own research funding. This is definitely something that you have one of the eligible grants to support a diverse candidate through this means. This is something really great. Many of our diversity supplement candidates and trainees go on to get their own funding. So we have really great outcomes, especially at NINDS, for the folks that we support through this mechanism. And perhaps specifically to the physician, clinician scientists that we have on the call, the loan repayment program. There's a lot of misinformation about this program, but I hope that you listen and listen well and read carefully for yourself. Whoever you know that may have gotten this award may have gotten it under different circumstances, or may not be giving you the most accurate information. So highly recommend that you talk to someone at the Division of Loan Repayment about this. But this is a great opportunity to have your loans paid off up to $50,000 now. It used to be $35,000 a year, but with the new 21st Century Cures Act, that limit has been increased. So it's actually the best for folks who are doing clinical studies, but in the pediatric loan repayment program, basic science and clinical science is accepted for this particular award, but you can apply to the clinical award if you're doing clinical research. And there's many different areas of science. This is funding your loans, not your research, but you do have to submit a research proposal. So it might be akin to a fellowship award or a career development award. So it's going to be administratively reviewed, but as the current director of the payment programs, Dr. Erika Boone, would say, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but this is pretty close. So I highly recommend you look into this. I've actually worked with the loan repayment program, so I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this particular program. And I should say, your research has to be funded. It has to be funded through a nonprofit entity, so through a university or through research grants, but you do not have to have an NIH grant to apply for a loan repayment program award. So going into a little bit more about the institutional awards we have and awards that we have through our scientific communities. We have at the NIH a program or a funding mechanism called the R25, and essentially it's an institutional award that allows for educational experiences. So we have a summer R25 program that Lauren manages that can be all the way from high school students or undergraduate students, to give them opportunities to have rigorous hands-on research programs or research opportunities, excuse me. And they can come in all sorts of assortments of how these programs are run, but the idea is to be able to provide students from all backgrounds, but certainly we encourage having as diverse a pool of students as possible to be able to get these really enriched summer experiences. We also have the Blueprint Endure program, which is also specifically for undergraduates, but many of our undergraduates, I think it's about 75% of them who finish this program have gone on to get PhDs. And we have about, I think, 5 now who are postdocs. And some of them have also gone on to medical school and are now in their internship or residency years. So this is a really great opportunity that is sort of builds on the summer program where you have 2 summer research experiences and 2 academic year experiences. And so this is also, even if you're a little bit further along in your career, these are great programs to connect with because you're able to really pull from diverse and very talented groups of undergraduates who are very, have a very clear idea of where they want to go with their careers. And then lastly, we have the Diversity R25 program, and we'll highlight a couple of them specifically that may be relevant to this group. But this is an opportunity for us to promote research opportunities and career development opportunities from the undergraduate level to junior faculty. So we have a current funding announcement out actually for the NINDS Diversity R25 program from graduate through junior faculty. But one of our really shining stars is the BRAINS program that deals with diverse junior faculty level, getting them from postdoc into faculty positions. And they really build community. It is a cohort. They call themselves the BRAINS family and really treat it that way. And everyone is invested in everyone else's success. So if you ever have an opportunity to interact with the folks at BRAINS at a research conference, I highly recommend it. They have a lot of just great energy and really have helped a lot of these folks as they transition to faculty and sort of hopefully eliminating some of the nervousness and anxiety of starting labs and starting research programs.
And another of our funded R25 programs that might be particularly relevant to the people on this webinar is the Transcends program, which is run through the AAN. And this is a program that trains early career neurologists in neuroscience research and supports them on their path to an academic career. And it also gives a clinical master's from MUSC at the end of the program. And then it has a matching program where it matches the fellows with more senior mentors in neurology. It's a relatively new program. I think it's been around for maybe 3 or 4 years now, but it's super exciting. And if you're eligible and interested, please check it out. And then we have another program that we wanted to highlight, which is the Comrade program, Congruent Mentorship to Reach Academic Diversity. And this is run through NYU. And it is for postdocs doing research in behavioral neuroscience and health equity. And this is a photo of me when I went to visit last summer. It's a really exciting program. All the scholars support each other. It pulls scholars from across the United States and then brings them together, I think once a year during their sort of summer annual meeting. And similar to the BRAINS program, really trying to support them in their scientific career. So these are just a few of these more professional development oriented R25s that we have. And so really encourage you to reach out and see if you can find one to participate in that would support you in your professional development, your career and networking, because they really are really nice programs and really nice communities to be a part of. So another thing I wanted to draw your attention to is breaking news. The NIH Common Fund, together with a whole bunch of different institutes and centers across the NIH, is starting a new program. It's called the FIRST program, which stands for Faculty Institutional Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation. And this is a cohort hiring program. So institutions, universities that get this award will be given funds to hire cohorts of junior faculty that are committed to promoting diversity. And along with that, they get funds to support faculty development, mentoring, sponsorship, promotion. But then along with those funds, they also have to show a commitment to institutional culture change. So they are also expected that if you're going to bring in these scholars that are from these underrepresented groups that are committed to diversity, you have to put them in an environment that is responsive to their needs and is going to support them and allow them to get tenure. And so a big piece of this FIRST program is also showing that the institution is willing to take a hard look at its culture and make the necessary changes to make it an inclusive environment. So the FOAs are not out yet, but there are 2 notices that describe what will be coming in the fall, hopefully. And so one of them is the coordinating center, and then the other one describes the actual FIRST awards. So please, please, please spread the word about these. NINDS in particular is very interested in getting neuroscience specific applications, but these applications can, you can have clusters. You can say, okay, we're going to have a cluster of, 3 neuroscience faculty, 3 cancer faculty, 3, hematology faculty, and that'll make up my cohort of 10 faculty or 9 faculty. But we're trying to spread the word and get as much neuroscience in there as possible, because we think that neuroscience has done a good job of having a commitment to diversity, and we can only do better. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that we're doing more broadly in the scientific community around policy and within NINDS as well. So, one of the things that I really like about the way that our office and NINDS is organized is that, we really try to integrate diversity throughout NINDS, that this is something that is not just the responsibility of the open office. This is something that is the responsibility of every program director at NINDS, and something that we're encouraging the program directors to think about and incorporate in all of their programs. And so some examples of this are with the scientific conferences. So NINDS has an R13 mechanism to fund scientific conferences. And this part of the FOA is that you must have appropriate representation of women and scientists from underrepresented backgrounds in your leadership, in your speakers, and your attendees. And this was something that sometimes applicants just weren't sure what to write, what was expected. And so we brought together people from across the entire institute to develop implementation guidance for both the reviewers and the applicants, so that people are empowered to make their conferences more diverse. And that's been a real success story over the past couple of years. We have really strengthened the language in the NINDS T32. So these are institutional training grants that support graduate training. And this is every time we issue this FOA, we just make that diversity and inclusion language even stronger and stronger, so that the universities really know that this is something we take seriously, and it's something that they have to put in their progress reports and all that jazz. And then we also have convened several workshops around various themes in diversity and inclusion, mostly bringing in our R25s, those research education programs, and our T32s to have that dialogue. And especially since most of our R25s are sort of earlier in the pipeline and the T32s are a little bit later, that really talking about like where the handoffs can be and how do we really shepherd students through the academic career pathway. And then finally, you know, just want to put the call out there that we need partners in the form of societies, institutions, departments, programs, and we can't do this alone. So really, you know, taking a hard look at how can you set the tone if you're in a position of leadership? How can you be an advocate for inclusive practices? How can you educate yourself? How can you make your goals explicit and then really hold yourself accountable for developing strategies and achieving those goals? Are you looking at your climate and your awareness, and are you trying to find ways that you can do better? And if you're looking for suggestions or places to start or places to continue that work, we have the Advanced program funded by NSF that has done a lot of work in sort of gender equity. We have the HHMI Inclusive Excellence and AAASC Change. We have materials from our workshops. And then Michelle Jones-London, the chief of our office, just published a really nice summary of what we're doing at NINDS, but also strategies to consider in the broader neuroscience community. And that's a NeuroView published in Neuron called NINDS Strategies for Enhancing the Diversity of Neuroscience Researchers. So these are just a few of the many, many resources that have come out in the recent months since the Black Lives Matter movement has really had a resurgence. So I really highly encourage you all to take a look at those and check them out. Now I'll turn it over to Erika.
Thank you very much, Lauren and Marguerite, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today as we discuss this incredibly important topic. I'm just going to look for the screen that I'd like to share. Give me just a moment.
And while you're doing that, Dr. Augustine, I'm going to introduce you. So I wanted to thank Drs. Matthews and Ulrich for their presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Erika Augustine, who's the Robert Joint Associate Professor of Neurology, Pediatrics, and Associate Director of the Center for Health and Technology at the University of Rochester. Following residency training in pediatrics and pediatric neurology at Harvard University Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Augustine completed dual fellowships in pediatric movement disorders and experimental therapeutics with a focus on clinical trial design. Dr. Augustine specializes in the care of children with movement disorders, and her clinical research program focuses on advancing therapeutic development for rare pediatric neurological disorders with an emphasis on comprehensive clinical phenotyping and trial design. Dr. Augustine leads clinical programs developing novel therapeutics for the neuronal ceroid lipofuscinoses, also known as Batten diseases, a group of rare pediatric neurodegenerative disorders. Dr. Augustine.
Thank you again for the invitation. I was really glad to see so many join today's call. I see that we have a lot of questions coming in, so we'll dive right in. And I'd like us to broaden how we think about funding opportunities, as you heard Lauren and Marguerite speak to towards the end of their talk, on broader opportunities that will reflect retention and the need for retention. Right now, I think in the current socio-political moment and demands for social justice, many of us are thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are forming new plans at our home institutions on how we can address these issues. I'd like to call your attention to the NIH Scientific Workforce Diversity Toolkit. It provides a really sound evidence base for the need for diversity as it relates to innovation, as Marguerite mentioned, and it organizes specific actions around talent searches, creating diverse recruitment and candidate pools, the importance of mentoring, and also thinking about outreach and networking. It's a really, really nice resource. And I also would like to point you to a publication last month in the New England Journal that also tried to tackle this issue. And they honed in on a few key important areas for institutions to consider as it relates to recruitment and retention of underrepresented minorities in medical subspecialties like pediatric neurology. One was continuing education for leaders to become better acquainted and much more familiar with the potential unique needs of underrepresented minority faculty. Structural support for mentoring and for training, be it time, effort, or funds required. And then very much related to our topic today, for institutions to be aware of and to support underrepresented minority targeted local and national funding opportunities. As I looked at the attendees today, I was really so delighted to see both individuals that I recognized who are early in their career, as well as people who are program directors, division chiefs, department chairs, and that was really fantastic to see that whole spectrum, because we all need to be aware of what targeted funding opportunities actually exist. This whole webinar series is called Challenges in Pediatric Neuroscience Research, and we have a few challenges that are especially relevant for child neurology. One is that there are high, and especially as it relates to the workforce, there are quite heavy clinical demands for child neurologists. Children's hospitals are always hiring child neurologists. Wait times for new visits are quite long. And when you look at projections that relate to the demand for child neurologists, as you see in black, the black dotted line here, estimates around the baseline full-time equivalent demand for child neurologists, compared to estimates of what the actual supply is or is projected to be in the blue dotted line. You can see there's quite a gap. So there really are a lot of clinical pressures for our scientific workforce. And then there's the ongoing and existing challenge of the leaky clinician scientist pipeline. There are so many areas for the off-ramp or the exit out of a clinical research career. And as Marguerite mentioned, we really have such challenge related to diversity of the child neurologist environment in the first place as it relates to faculty. When we have a subset of individuals who are then interested in a research path, we really need to do everything that we can to foster retention in this pipeline. Sometimes that retention really is in the form of funding opportunities, as we've been describing, and conventional funding opportunities that are salary support, research support for specific development of programs. The Harold Amos Medical Faculty Development Program is an important one to be aware of. This is not an NIH initiative. This is a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation program that is very expressly designed to increase the number of minority faculty who achieve success in academic medicine. It comes in the form of a 4-year postdoctoral research award with salary support, some degree of research support, and as you would see with NIH awards at the same level and same type, again, protected time for research. There also is an expansive and extensive national mentoring network and retreat that goes along with this as well. And I think there are actually some who are funded and who have been funded through this mechanism on today's call. Funding opportunities can go beyond research as well, though, and thinking about other elements of success in academia that require funds or have associated cost. Leadership development, career development can be part of that. The AAMC has a robust suite of seminars around career development, including 2 that are targeted to minority faculty, one for early career, one for mid-career. And these are seminars that really provide tangible, actionable guidance that is timely for career advancement in academic medicine. And paired with the early career Minority Faculty Leadership Development Seminar is a grant writers coaching group for those who are actively working on writing a NIHK or our proposal. There's a workshop at that time, but then there's also a robust wraparound program as well. There are costs associated with participation in these, and this is again another opportunity where institutions have the opportunity to really support and sponsor their minority faculty to engage with these really fantastic programs. Along those lines, I'd like to just take a minute or two to talk about the Minority Research Scholars Program. This is an initiative of the Child Neurologist Career Development Program, which is led by Brad Schlager, the Child Neurology Society, and the Neurobiology of Disease in Children program led by Bernard Maria. And for child neurologists and neurodevelopmental disability specialists, the goal of this program is to support retention in that pipeline of clinician scientists. A word about the K-12 program. This also is a career development award. It's a 3-year program. Again, salary support, some research support, protected time for that early career phase, and for those who are preparing to apply for a future K-23 or K-08 award. Lauren mentioned the real efforts to have a much more solid, actionable practice of inclusion, particularly for training awards and career development awards. And that is precisely what we were thinking about when we developed the K-12 program and thought about our approach to diversity. And looking at the career span and how we might address that and thinking about who our target audience was, well, our K-12 award is really a postdoctoral research training period. And we thought about building a proximate pipeline, those who were almost ready to apply for the K-12. And we were looking for ways to, again, just using that same language, how do we open opportunities? How do we open access? And with those thoughts in mind, we developed the Minority Research Scholars Program. I also want to call attention to the bottom of the figure here that the Diversity Supplement Program, again, really spans the vast majority of the early career phase and is a really important opportunity to know about. In terms of the MRSP, we're interested in individuals who are underrepresented in medicine, who are in their clinical training or within 3 years of having completed that training, who really have demonstrated research experience already. It's a retention program, and so we're looking for those who have already engaged in research. And what is the funding opportunity? Well, it is travel support for a week wraparound programming from the K-12 retreat to the Neurobiology of Disease in Children program and the annual Child Neurology Society meeting. And as you can see, there's been a robust program that spans that week. The program has really grown over the course of the last 3 years. That is not only research training and communication education, but a lot of mentoring and networking, and now some degree of sponsorship as well. In our first 3 years of the program, we had 17 participants who are underrepresented child neurologists or neurodevelopmental disability specialists with pursuing research careers. About 40% of whom were MD, Ph.D, 70% of whom were female. And in the subsequent 3 cycles of the K-12, we had 5 of those who had participated in the MRSP go on to apply for that specific career development award. So almost half of those who are eligible have actually applied, and some are still very early in their career, so we expect that number to grow as the cohort grows. We just named our most recent scholars, and so by the end of this year, we will have had almost 25 participants just in a few years, all within that very focused area or background. People have been able to, we've seen over these years that we've retained people in academic medical centers. There are high rates of publication following participation in the program. And while we can't attribute that all to the program, we do think that these kinds of experiences are really important touch points as we're looking to retain in that pipeline. And we recognize that 1 week of one experience is not sufficient. And so we've been creating more recently ways that we can continue to foster community and continue to engage. And we now have a K-12 webinar series that is open also to those who have been in the program. We recently developed an alumni LinkedIn group, a private group for communicating information, sharing successes, and also communicating opportunities. And we've started to develop writing groups, pairing individuals who are in the process of writing a grant. And so former alumni may actually work together to inspire each other, motivate each other, and really for each one another improve writing and communication as well. So I think there's a lot that we can do here. I'm really, again, pleased to see some former MRSP participants on today's call. And I hope they're also excited to hear about and see the growth of the program as well. I think we'll want to open things up to questions. It sounds like there are quite a few that have come through and are ready. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we will now start the Q&A period. So as Dr. Augustine mentioned, we have more questions than we have time to answer them. We have 2 full pages, so we're not going to get through them all. So if we run out of time, please send your question either to the presenters or to me. But in the meantime, let's try a lightning round to see what we can do. And I would ask the presenters to keep their answers informative but brief. So first question for the group. Are there any funding mechanisms for mid-career underrepresented minorities?
So I don't know of any specific like research targeted FOAs for underrepresented minorities. Mostly those opportunities focus on, providing that professional development and support. Yeah, I don't know. Marguerite, do you know of any?
No.
Okay.
I
Next.
would also just keep an eye on foundation awards. I think that just with all of the events of 2020, I'm aware of a number of foundations who are starting to rethink their funding programs and some who are actually developing targeted awards for underrepresented faculty. So I would say over the next year or so, keep your eyes open.
Great. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected current or ongoing funding programs?
NIH programs, we are continuing on. Our funding in our office is the same. We do have, some of our individual awardees have been impacted. And in certain situations, we've provided supplements to have funded extensions of the fellowships and things like that. But we're just sort of playing it by ear in terms of what's going to happen in the future.
One message that I think has been very clearly communicated is how much everyone has been affected by COVID in terms of their research, in terms of productivity, and some have been very concerned about a slowdown in their research and productivity. And I think we're all experiencing that. One thing to also, again, kind of keep an eye on are directed and targeted funding opportunities that may be related to COVID, especially for those of you who might be looking at potentially R03s or R21s for small projects. There may be some targeted funding that is relevant.
Great. So if someone's working on an H-1B visa and they're not eligible for NIHK awards, what other comparable opportunities are available?
I think Erika's suggestion of looking to foundations is a great one. I know that there are some scientific societies and foundations that offer awards that are very similar to the NIHK, but maybe Erika knows a little bit more.
There are, and I think that is a very common path. So, foundation awards, we tend to think of them as being small. I gave the Harold Amos example specifically to highlight that they don't have to be small, and they sometimes are equivalent or similar in size to NIH funds as well at the career development level. The American Academy of Neurology is another source for considering funds. And then individual or disease-specific foundations that have an early career program, even more so than pilot award programs, are often also a good source to take a look at for everyone, especially so if qualification for NIH funding is an issue.
Great. Next question. Which awards are available for independent scientists who are not associated with a university or research institute or a similar organization?
That is a good question. I think for all NIH awards, it's my understanding that you would need to be associated with some kind of university because you're showing, that you have a place to do the work, and NIH grants officially go to the institution itself as opposed to the PI. It's not actually the PI's award, it's the institution's award. I would imagine that there might be some more nonprofit or society awards that might be available, but I don't think there are any NIH awards that would be appropriate for an independent scientist.
So I'll jump in a little bit on this one. If you look at the first part of the funding opportunities, their eligibility criteria. You can be somewhat independent, but you have to file certain paperwork with the something called a DUNS number, and so it's a little bit complicated. But if you look at the beginning of the funding opportunity announcement, you can see what those eligibility criteria are. All right, let's try to squeeze in one or two more questions. For the NINDS Faculty K01 Award, do you need to have a faculty position at the time of application or at the time of award?
So this is a very common question that we get. So for us, we say that you need a tenure track position by time of award. So we will not release the funds unless you're in a tenure track position at time of award. And so this actually can be used as leverage. We've had people successfully get the K01 and then use that to make the argument for, let's say they're in a research track position and they're being switched to tenure track, or they're in postdoc and they're being promoted. But we also don't want you to go through the work of putting together this whole application and then you're not promoted and you can't get the money. So if that's your situation, you just need to be very explicit with your institution, and you should also have a conversation with us about what the possibilities are.
All right, so last question, this will be a quick one, and then we'll wrap it up. So who applies for the diversity supplement? The trainee/postdoc or the PI?
So this will go through the PI, but certainly the trainee is welcome to work with their PI on this. I've talked with a lot of folks who are the trainee and they've passed on that information to the PI, but the PI has to submit it through their ERA. Well, it has to go through ASSIST. So generally it's the PI, but you can still be part of writing the award.
And your PI may not be familiar with the mechanism, so I would not be afraid to bring the idea to that person. Yes,
and certainly reach out to the point of contact for the supplement at the NIHIC that you're applying to. So if it's NINDS, you could send me an email. Happy to talk with the candidate or the PI or both. And yeah, so anything that we can do to help make the process more simple, please always talk to a program officer when in doubt.
And I'm just going to jump in here and put in a plug for our podcast. It's called Building Up the Nerve, and it goes through every single step of the grant application process, including why you should talk to your program officer.
Great advice. Well, the hour is here, so I really wanted to thank all of our presenters. That was really fantastic. The session was recorded, as I mentioned at the top, and will be transcribed and archived on the NINDS website in the coming week or so. Details about where to find the archive version will be posted on social media and professional society listservs and newsletters. So again, thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. Thank you so much to all of our presenters. Really, really fantastic work. And look forward to the next webinar on challenges in pediatric neuroscience. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.